Hi class. Now I want to talk to you about a different chapter, chapter 10, Intelligence, Problem Solving, and Creativity. It's an interesting chapter because we many times put so much weight on intelligence. We're going to talk about intelligence tests here in a minute. But let me just start with the definition of intelligence too. So when we look at intelligence, it's defined as a set of cognitive skills that include abstract thinking, reasoning, problem solving, and the ability to acquire knowledge. That's kind of the basic definition of it. The text goes over several theories of intelligence, and let's just go over them. It starts out with the single ability theory by Charles Spearman. He said there was a G factor that was a specific. It's kind of more of like the raw intelligence, being able to figure things out. But he would say that all things correlated from this one source. So he had this. He brought this forward. He kind of started the ball going, and then from there, there was an evolutionary process. Raymond Ch10, he divided intelligence into two categories: fluid intelligence, which is that raw ability, kind of like that G factor. And then also there's a crystallized intelligence, so that's intelligence that we gain from experience, academic experience, those type of things. Then we go to John Carroll. Carroll extended Ch10's theory to 3 levels, and the text has got a nice little chart there that shows that. General intelligence, kind of this, this kind of almost, well, let me just go there real quick here. Let's see the statement in the text here. So general factor is kind of like that G factor that started out things. And then we've got this broad intelligence, which identifies a whole bunch of different categories. And then it's more narrow, specific cognitive abilities. So he's got these 3 levels to it. Then there's Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence. And Sternberg has got also a triarchic theory of love as well. There's a lot of things in 3s. But he says there's analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence. And so to kind of explain each of those, analytical intelligence is that ability to take in information and use it, store it and use it. Creative intelligence is kind of thinking outside of that box, and practical intelligence is just kind of that good horse sense. I make good decisions, those type of things. And so we say there's 3 levels of intelligence in those categories. And then Gardner really brought it forward in saying that there are all different levels of intelligence. And so, for example, if I asked you, name some famous intelligent people. My class often will mention Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, people that have got that notoriety for intelligence. But I'll throw out Mike Tyson. Said, do you think Mike Tyson is intelligent? Usually they don't agree with that. Or I'll say, how about Britney Spears? Do you think she's intelligent? Usually they don't give her that credit. But what we find as we look through this process, that in fact, at least as far as Gardner is concerned, there's different types of intelligences. So he talks about linguistic intelligence, logical mathematical intelligence, musical intelligence, kind of Britney Spears might be in there. Bodily kinesthetics, these would be athletes. Mike Tyson is an example there. Spatial, interpersonal, interpersonal, naturalistic, and well, those are the basic ones. There's some stretch into spirituality, but it's not really been embraced completely with that. So Gardner would say that there's multiple intelligence that are out there. When we look at the history of intelligence, there's 3 distinct periods: 1910 to 1980, tests for practical and clinical concerns. 1980 through 1990 were the first theory-driven type of intelligence tests, so based off of Ch10's approach or Carroll's approach. They were intelligence tests that were just primarily designed off of theory, Sternberg's approach. 1990s intelligence can be many things, and that's when we began to realize maybe Howard Gardner's got something to this. The first psychological tests were established by Binet and Simon. Early 1900s, what happened is he was commissioned by the French Ministry of Education there was a lot of children that were orphans, and he wanted to find out which ones were educable. So he kind of started the thing going, and what he did is he looked at a bunch of kids and doing different tasks. And so if the typical 5-year-old can tie their shoes, somebody who is 7 would, and not able to tie their shoes, they might fall at a lower level as far as their, what he coined the word mental age. And then William Stern, he introduced a mathematical ratio, age times 100, or excuse me, mental age divided by chronological age times 100 equals an IQ. So that added some numbers to it. That's where we get our, not exactly how we get our numbers, but that's where we get the concept of putting a number on an IQ score. Lewis Terman then translated Binet's tests using Stern IQs and determined norms for different ages. And those are, he's got the famous Stanford Binet IQ test. It's an IQ test that I've used before. It's not one that I typically use. I usually use what they call the WAIS, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale test. There's also one for children and for preschoolers as well. David Wessler is the one who brought that forward, and he's certainly the WAIS is much more well known in America than the Stanford Binet, and is widely used as a measure of intelligence. There is some components when we look at intelligence that are important. That is reliability and validity. Reliability, that means if I test your IQ today, 6 months from now, if I test your IQ, there shouldn't be a whole lot of change. There's going to be some change to it due to error, but there's probably not going to be a dramatic amount of change, and that's test, retest reliability. That's just something that you expect to see in a, what they call a gold standard test. There's also internal reliability, and that is whether or not the questions on the subtest correlate with each other. Do they relate with each other? Validity, there's two types of validity that we look at when we're developing an IQ test or intelligence test, and that is construct validity. Does the test measure what it's supposed to measure? And predictive validity, does it predict world outcomes? And so those are the key components associated with it. One of the questions that the text addresses and is often brought up in class is whether or not IQ tests are biased. Do they predict better for one culture or one race than another, one cultural group than another? We do see group differences between the races or ethnicities as far as their IQ are concerned, but what causes this? What we find is that it doesn't predict IQ better for Caucasians than it does for Latinos, for example. If it did, then it would be biased. But what we do know is that it may not be fair. In that regards, it's associated with, remember, nature versus nurture. Nature makes up 40% of our IQ. Nurture makes up 50% of our IQ, and 10% is unknown. And so there's that fairness component. If I've gone to a college prep school, am I going to do college prep high school? Am I going to do better on an IQ test than somebody who went to a school in the inner city? You betcha, probably. Just because of the exposure to the information. And so that's really the big debate, is whether or not IQ tests are actually fair. So typically when I do an IQ test, I'm going to address that in my report, whether or not there is that fairness component. For example, if I test an IQ of a child who's comes from a lower socioeconomic status, and maybe they are culturally restricted from opportunities of education that other cultures, maybe they're in a very rural area of America, or maybe they're in the inner city areas of America. Those are things you want to make sure you address in your report so that it's a balanced approach to it. Intellectual disability is typically somebody, this is the next stage, typically somebody with an IQ of less than 70. And the key word is, and also challenges in daily activities of daily living. That's the real emphasis. So even if I have an IQ of, say, 68, but I'm able to support myself and live independently, probably not going to be diagnosed with a developmental disability because of my activities of daily living. Now, if I'm 72 and I'm not able to live in IQ of 72, I'm not able to live independently, then I'm going to fall in that category, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Intellectual disabilities, key ones that are out there: Down syndrome, that's using an organic genetic component with trisomy 21. Intellectual developmental disabilities, example would be Fragile X. We've got the XY. Usually this is more males than females, just because of the whole XX and XY chromosome. But this is where a male might have one of the X chromosome is fractured or broken. There's also fetal alcohol syndrome, what they call also a familial culture retardation. And then this is, again, more prevalent in lower socioeconomic status. Nothing wrong with the families. They're doing great. But they many times will not have the opportunities to be exposed to an academic environment that somebody from a middle income or upper middle income, the one percenters, have. That's one extreme. The other extreme is gifted. And this is defined as somebody with a high end of intelligence spectrum using an IQ between 130 and above. And these are your prodigies, like Mozart would be one. Akin Kramaric, who's showcased in your text, she's an art prodigy. These would be individuals. The ones that I like the most, that I worked with them primarily during my internship and my residency, finishing my doctorates up, getting licensed here, were savants. Now, there's only about 100 of them, so I never really worked with a savant, but I worked with individuals that had savant-like abilities. So these are individuals that have got this amazing ability. For example, Kim Peek is probably the most famous savant that was out there. He just recently passed away. He actually visited Snowflake, I think it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. An interesting guy. But he doesn't have a corpus callosum. That's that middle band that separates one side to the other side. And so he would process information and remember like 97% of everything he read. And what's interesting is that one eye would read one page and the other eye would read the other page. And so he would read through the material quickly and retain, again, such a huge percentage of it. So that's an example of a savant. He wasn't able to live independently. His father had to take care of him. His IQ, I think they said his IQ was like 72 or 73. So that's an example with an IQ above 70. But because of his activities of daily living, he would fall in that category. Let's see what else we got. Nature versus nurture. There's that debate. Again, I just talked about it. I just kind of let the cat out of the bag, for lack of a better expression, is that 40% of our IQ is genetic, 50% is nurture, and 10% is unknown. And that's based off of identical twin studies and fraternal twin studies, primarily. We do know there's a reaction range of 25 points, kind of illustrating that shared, unshared environment component of intelligence. The text talks about the group differences, race, ethnicity, and intelligence. Arthur Jensen kind of got things going, was saying that some races were superior than others. Murray and Herrnstein kind of added fire to the flame with their book called The Bell Curve. Most of the research is going to say there's not a whole lot to support that, because we've got that whole reaction range associated with our environment. Gender differences, again, no significant difference between males and females, except in males have a wider range of diversity when we see our IQ scores. And there's non-Western views of intelligence. It's definitely, when you look at different cultures, they're going to view intelligence differently. For example, my foot's caught here. Some Asian cultures will look at more of their interactions with each other as intelligent, as opposed to this raw IQ score. Problem solving is the second half of the chapter. We talk about convergent thinking. It's narrowing down answers. Those are usually individuals that do really well academically, who have that skill. And divergent thinkers are people that think outside of the box. They talk about solution strategies, algorithms, insight solutions, that eureka moment when it's come to me, now I know how to do it. These are strategies for problem solving. And again, thinking outside of the box. Obstacles to solutions: fixation, being kind of in a stuck mindset, can't think outside the box, can't think of other options. Functional fixedness, which is blindness to unusual uses of common everyday things, That would be an example of that. For example, I was stuck and I was working late at the college, and my wife is Chinese, so I primarily eat Chinese food, and I forgot to bring my utensils, and I thought, well, it's not really a finger food, stir fry is not really a finger food, and I went outside and I thought, well, what can I use? And I saw some sticks on a tree and thought, yeah, I don't know what's been on that tree. So then I went inside and I had pencils with erasers. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool because they make good chopsticks. And I thought I was going to be a millionaire, the next millionaire. If I could make chopsticks with rubber tips on them, that would be good for kids learning to use chopsticks. But went to the Asian market and lo and behold, it was already there. So that's why I'm still teaching NPC. I would still teach it even if I was a millionaire. All right, creativity. Last component of this second half of the chapter. 4 stages. There's preparation, incubation, insight, and verification. And then, let's see what else we got here. We talk about, the last thing they talk about that I want to mention is the creative personality. And that is in your text. Let me find it real quick here. Just want to mention the highlights of it. Here we go. Bear with me for just a moment. Go to the right page. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see if I can find that real quick here. Thanks for being patient, guys. Here we go. So this is in the 10th edition, page 398. They talk about the personality traits of somebody who's creative. Open to new experiences, self-confident, arrogant, dominant, hostile, driven, ambitious, impulsive, not conventional, and not conscientious. And so if you think of famous people that are really creative, a lot of those personality traits fit to them. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the class. And that is finish up the introduction to chapter 10. Thank you, guys.